If you experienced deja vu during this morning's sermon, that's because some of what I want to say this morning I said last year around Thanksgiving time. I preached a sermon then entitled Gratitude in Tough Times. And much of what I said then, I want to say again in what has been a tough couple of weeks for justice-loving people. Having watched white supremacists be appointed to the future president's staff, seeing them float the idea of a Muslim registry, how this morning, you might ask, could we talk about gratitude? Well, I think we should, because in difficult times, gratitude is more important than ever, and just as possible as it ever was. Unitarian Universalist minister Galen Gingrich, as Mary said this morning, writes of gratitude, quote, "In the same way that Judaism is defined by obedience, Christianity by love, and Islam by submission, I believe that Unitarian Universalism should be defined by gratitude." Gingrich isn't talking about a feeling of gratitude exactly, though what he recommends might help folks have a feeling of gratitude. He writes further, "Two dimensions of gratitude make it fitting as our defining religious practice. One has to do with a discipline of gratitude, and the other has to do with an ethic of gratitude. The discipline of gratitude reminds us how utterly dependent we are on the people and the world around us for everything that matters. From this flows an ethic of gratitude that obligates us to create a future that justifies an increasing sense of gratitude from the human family as a whole. The ethic of gratitude demands that we nurture the world that nurtures us in return. It is our duty," he concludes, "to foster the kind of environment that we want to take in and therefore become." So Gingrich is recommending a philosophy of life that centers on gratitude. Lives which cultivate gratitude on purpose and then create a world in which gratitude is easier for the next generation than it has been for ours. But he's not the first person to suggest this. Last month, 331 people gathered in New York City for StoicCon. The slogan was, "Get your Stoic on at StoicCon." No doubt dad jokes abounded in this crowd. Organizers claim it was the largest gathering of Stoics, not just in modern times, but in history. Stoic philosophy has been given a bad name in our culture. It's misunderstood. We call people stoic who seem to experience no emotions. But in fact, the ancient Stoics wanted only to avoid destructive emotion as a way of fostering a gratitude for life, a gratitude that could soar above the conditions of everyday existence. Seems to me no one has ever practiced more fully the discipline of gratitude than the ancient Stoics, who emphasized working on improving the things that are in our control, many of which are internal. Happiness, they said, doesn't come mainly from external sources like money or career. Happiness is primarily about one's mental state. So, the Stoics asked, how does a person go about leading a happy, virtuous life? They said gratitude is key. As the Stoic Cicero said, gratitude is not only the greatest of virtues, but the parent of all the others. The goal, Epictetus wrote, was to be able to be, quote, sick and yet happy, in peril and yet happy, dying and yet happy, in exile and happy, in disgrace and happy. This, again, is not the absence of emotion or the absence of acknowledging difficult times. It is the ability to see and think clearly, to keep to the good life in the face of real human experience, the ups and downs of day-to-day life. In prescribing a path for getting there, the Stoic philosophers said something that might seem antithetical to happiness and gratitude on its face. They told their followers to meditate on the most frightening things in their lives and do it often. The Stoics believe that it's often our fear of those things and not the things in themselves that cause pain. That includes death and the fear of death. The Stoic philosopher Seneca wrote to a friend, "Forget all else and concentrate your thoughts on this one thing, not to fear the name of death. Through long reflection, make death one of your close acquaintances, so that if the situation arises, you are able even to go out and meet it. Gratitude, he said, is the starting point. Robert Emmons is something of a modern-day Stoic philosopher. He's a professor at UC Davis. He has for years studied and written about the science of gratitude. He reports that about half of our tendency toward happiness is set in our genetics. 10% he thinks is due to external forces. But 40%, Emmons says, of the happiness that we do or do not feel is within our control, coming as the result of our own habits and practices. According to Emmons, living a life of gratitude is more about intention than about feeling. In his book, Gratitude Works, he makes the case that gratitude is not only possible during tough times, but that it helps us make it through them. He recommends a few practices. The first one, which sounds a lot like the Stoics' prescriptions, is to remember the bad. He writes, it works this way. Think of the worst times in your life, your sorrows, your losses, your sadness, and then remember that there you are, able to remember them, that you made it through the worst times of your life. You got through the trauma. You got through the trial. You endured the temptation. You survived the bad relationship. You're making your way out of the dark. Remember the bad things, then look to see where you are now. Emmons once conducted a study asking people with debilitating illnesses to write an essay about a time when they felt a deep sense of gratitude. He wrote of that study, I asked them to let themselves recreate that experience in their minds so they could feel the emotions as if they had transported themselves back in time to the event itself. I also had them reflect on what they felt in that situation, how they expressed those feelings. In the face of progressive diseases, people often find life extremely challenging, painful, and frustrating. So Emmons says, I wondered whether it would be even possible for them to find anything to be grateful about. For many of them, life revolved around visits to the pain clinic and the pharmacy. I would not have been at all surprised if resentment overshadowed gratefulness. But as it turned out, most respondents had trouble settling on one specific instance. They had too much in their lives that they were grateful for. Emmons said, I was struck by the profound depth of feeling that they conveyed in their essays, and by the apparent life-transforming power of gratitude in many of their lives. In those accounts, reading them, it becomes evident that one, gratitude can be an overwhelmingly intense feeling. Two, that gratitude for gifts that others easily overlook can be the most powerful and frequent form of thankfulness. And three, gratitude can be chosen in spite of one's situation or circumstances. Gratitude can be chosen. Emmons said he was struck too by the redemptive twist that occurred in about half of the narratives. Out of something bad, suffering or adversity or affliction, came something good, new life or new opportunities for which the person felt profoundly grateful. Gratitude in sickness and in health. The world's great religions echo the call to practices of gratitude. It's said that the Buddha sometimes instructed monks to begin their day by taking their sitting cloth into the woods and meditating on a series of moments or people in their lives for which they were grateful. The practice was meant to gladden the heart. The Christian disciple Paul wrote, in everything give thanks, not for everything, but in everything. The Sufi poet Rumi wrote the poem The Guest House, which reads, this being human is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. It may be clearing you out for some new delight. But maybe this isn't sitting well with you. Maybe you're saying, yeah, right. You don't know how I feel. You don't know what's happened to me, and that's true. And what's more, gratitude shouldn't be about ignoring the difficulties of life. How shallow and empty it would be to pretend that death didn't hurt, that separation was not painful, that illness wasn't a big deal, that unfulfilled dreams had no effect on us, or that this horrible season of American politics was normal, that we all weren't broken somehow. But I say that if you're going to be effective in justice work in the coming years, you and I, we need to practice gratitude. Emmons suggests that the second part of gratitude, after giving thanks, is remembering to whom the good things in your life can be attributed. The food that I will eat on Thursday, for instance, comes to me through the hands of many people of various identities and nationalities, various social class statuses. I depend on them. I cannot do this on my own. Even a simple thing like a meal, I cannot do on my own. Gratitude is a reminder of that. The practice of gratitude cultivates empathy and identification with people on whom we depend, and empathy is so sorely needed in these days. Friends, there are lights along the path of gratitude, no matter how dark it becomes. One of them for me is Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Bonhoeffer was a German Lutheran pastor who spoke out against Hitler's persecution of the Jews. He was jailed, then transferred to a concentration camp, then released. But after his release, he was part of a plot on the life of Adolf Hitler, a failed attempt at assassination for which he was tried and executed. In the midst of all the suffering that was a shadow over Bonhoeffer's life, he wrote this: "There's nothing that can replace the absence of someone dear to us, and one should not even attempt to do so. One must simply hold out and endure it. At first that sounds very hard, but at the same time it is also a great comfort. For to the extent the emptiness truly remains unfulfilled, one remains connected to the person through it. It is wrong to say that God fills the emptiness, but gratitude transforms the torment of memory into silent joy. One bears what was lovely in the past, not as a thorn, but as a precious gift deep within, a hidden treasure of which one can always be certain." From prison, Bonhoeffer wrote this sentence: "In normal life, we hardly recognize how much more we receive than we give, and life cannot be rich without such gratitude." I am humbled by the example of Bonhoeffer's gratitude. It's important to note that all this work on gratitude is for you, for me, to improve our lives, not because we should be more grateful. What progressive person needs one more thing to feel guilty about? But because your life is extraordinary and valuable, and the mindset with which we approach our lives really does make a difference in our experience, including the ability to be an ally in the fight for justice. In that fight, we do not need one more sour liberal. We need people who have cultivated empathy and gratitude and can get in touch with that even in the middle of difficult circumstances. You can't de-escalate, for example, without that. Well, gratitude, even in tough times, is possible, is necessary. I want to conclude with a poem from Adam Zagaszewski. It became well known around the time of the September 11th, 2001. Try to praise the mutilated world. Remember June's long days and wild strawberries, drops of wine, the dew, the nettles that methodically overgrow the abandoned homesteads of exiles. You must praise the mutilated world. You watched the stylish yachts and ships. One of them had a long trip ahead of it, while salty oblivion awaited others. You've seen the refugees heading nowhere. You've heard the executioners sing joyfully. You should still praise the mutilated world. Remember the moments when we were together in a white room and the curtain fluttered. Return in thought to the concert where music flared. You gathered acorns in the park in autumn and leaves eddied over the earth's scars. Praise the mutilated world and the gray feather a thrush lost and the gentle light that strays and vanishes and returns. So this morning, perhaps in that spirit, we come to practice gratitude, to ritualize gratitude in our Thanksgiving communion.